I'm a hunter-gatherer of information, and sometimes my interests take me down the proverbial rabbit hole. On one such occasion, I was helping a teacher test her kindergartners about number recognition. After several students told me that 11 and 12 are actually 11-teen and 12-teen, I wanted to know why they consistently made this mistake. The two teachers simply said that eventually something just clicks, and kids understand. Okay, but why? At the time, I was studying for my master's in educational psychology with specializations in positive and neuropsychology. I contacted one of my neuropsychology professors and explained what I'd experienced. One of his explanations was dyscalculia. Dyscalculia what? I'd never heard of it. The only learning disorder I knew about at that time was dyslexia, and this was not that. As he explained the disorder, I had an aha moment. It was like a fog lifted, revealing a vibrant field of wildflowers. Suddenly, I understood something about myself no one in my childhood through adulthood had ever explained. He pointed me to a few resources. I completed some self-tests and had my answer. Not to the kindergarten question, but to one I'd struggled with my whole life. For years, my family and teachers thought I wasn't good at math. To say I felt like an idiot is a complete understatement. While my peers seemed able to rattle off answers to math problems without much thought, I was dumbfounded. Why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't I count change back? Why couldn't I tell time on an analog clock? Why couldn't I count backwards or subtract in my head? Or on paper, if I'm being honest. Who needs fractions anyway? And decimals? What's the point of them? And what do those lopsided V symbols mean? During undergrad, I failed every math course. It was the only thing standing between me and graduation. When I finally passed the only class left for me to meet the math requirement, liberal arts physics, I was never so happy to get a D in my life. Fast forward, and now I'm teaching and writing about psychology. Do I avoid math? Well, that would be impossible. So, how does someone who went undiagnosed for years adapt in a world where numbers are inescapable? And what's going on in the brain that's making numbers such a mystery? Researchers don't entirely understand what causes dyscalculia, but they believe the intraparietal sulcus, IPS, offers some answers. This part of the brain, as you probably have guessed, is in the parietal lobe. It's between the superior and inferior parietal lobules. It kind of looks like a meandering river. The IPS is involved in spatial and numerical information processing. This includes quantity processing, arithmetic, like adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and estimating. Yeah, all that fun stuff. When involved in math-related tasks, researchers have found less activity in this area of the brain in people with dyscalculia than in people without it. They also believe there's a disconnect between the IPS and other brain areas like the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC, and the occipitotemporal cortex. Some functions of the PFC are working memory, attention, and executive function. One of the challenges of dyscalculia is an inability to hold numbers in mind. You need working memory for this. I can repeat numbers, but if something or someone interrupts me, the numbers are poof, gone. And I've been this way for as long as I can remember. So imagine trying to complete a multiple-step math problem, but you can't keep the numbers in your head long enough to do it. In everyday life, this applies to any job involving money handling. Researchers have investigated too many areas of the brain to list here. The bottom line is, they're still working on this puzzle. While they continue their endeavor, those of us who grew up during a time when no one heard of dyscalculia have spent years adapting to and finessing our environments to our advantage. For me, this has meant using calculators, apps to figure out tips and discounts, my fingers or other manipulatives, rounding up to add because subtraction is hard, hiring people who know math, and leaning into my strengths. I've never gotten an official diagnosis. Getting a master's in ed psych was enough. When you do that, you understand tests, measurements, and the costs associated with them. I was in my 40s and had already lived with my math problem a long time. Finally learning my lifelong experience had a name was enough. Besides, those tests can cost upwards of $5,000. That's math I do understand. Learning more about neurobiology, whether it be through a course like the Neurobiology of Everyday Life, books, or videos, has helped me better understand myself. It's also reinforced that we're all here doing the best we can with the cards we're dealt. Sometimes those cards suck, but when we understand what's happening in our brain, it makes meeting the challenges a bit easier.